welcome to my house. I want to first of all thank you for joining me as we unwrap another wonderful, amazing story. I want to also thank my good friend Rick Borman for substituting for me last week while I was laid low by the flu that seems to be ravaging the countryside. Glad to be back with you today, feeling great, particularly feeling great that you're here with me today. So the other day, I was having coffee at one of my favorite coffee shops. I looked across the room at a 30-something guy out for dessert with his 9 or 10-year-old daughter. She was so beautiful, sugar and spice, everything nice. As I watched the two together, I remembered years ago when my 9, 10-year-old daughter, Rachel, and I used to go out for a movie afterwards for ice cream, for pizza, and those were special days for me. And as I watched, I suddenly became aware that he wasn't looking at his daughter. He wasn't talking to her. Neither was she talking to him. Both of them had their heads down. He looking at his mobile device, scrolling through it. She texting on her mobile device. I watched for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Not once did they look at each other. Not once did this precious little girl and her father have a face-to-face conversation. As I got up to leave, I took a chance, walked across the room and said to him, "What a beautiful daughter you have. She's so precious. She's so sweet." The man smiled in pride, and then I said to him, I remember when my daughter was about that age, and we used to go out and have those special dates together. Except when we were doing that, there were no mobile devices. And we used to actually have to talk to each other. And I looked at him and I said, "Don't waste these precious moments. You'll never have them back again." I wish with all my heart that I could have my 38-year-old busy attorney daughter back as a little girl with me once again. I braced, not knowing how he would respond. He smiled rather sheepishly and pushed his mobile device away and reached across the table and took the mobile device out of his little girl's hand and put it next to his device. I left, and as I walked out the door, I looked over my shoulder, and there, father and daughter were in an animated conversation with each other. As I walked away, I thought about a story that I had written in my book of amazing stories. A story about the sweet potato that destroyed China. The story begins somewhere around the year 1492. When Columbus discovered America, or more precisely, bumped into the New World. He wasn't the first one to discover America. Historians now believe that perhaps even Carthaginians from North Africa came to the shores of North America 300 years before Christ. But Columbus did change the world. Something that historians call the Columbian Exchange. By that meaning that things were traded in different parts of the world in a new way. For instance, lemon trees, orange trees, really aren't indigenous to the Americas. They come from North Africa. Spices from Asia. Horses and pigs came to America. We now know that 90% of the vegetation in my home state of Florida comes from somewhere other than Florida. And before Columbus came to the New World, the Italians had no tomato sauce to put on the pasta that they got from China. The Irish had no potatoes. The French had no cigarettes to smoke. There were no chocolates in Switzerland, and no coffee shops in Amsterdam. You see, all of these things were indigenous to the New World. And that leads me to the story of the sweet potato that destroyed China. Somewhere in the 1500s, a Spanish galleon came upon a trading post, a small town of Manila in the Philippines, upon an annual event, Chinese junks bringing the treasures of China to trade with other Asian traders in Manila. Now, at that time, China was the biggest and the wealthiest country in the world, but they wanted nothing to do with the West. But they discovered something that those Spanish had that they desperately wanted: silver. The finest silver in the world, mined in the Spanish colonies of the Americas. And so after that, hundreds of Chinese junks came to Manila to meet with hundreds of Spanish galleons filled with the finest silver in the world. And the Spanish traded that for spices and silks and porcelain, ivory, other great treasures of the East. And in the process, Spain became the richest nation in Europe. One of those times, a Chinese merchant was passing by a group of Spanish sailors who were eating a baked sweet potato. Sweet potatoes were indigenous to the New World. The sailors offered the merchant a taste of their sweet potato, and it became love at first bite. The Chinese merchant thought sweet potatoes could be a great supplement to rice in China. And so he asked the Spanish if they would bring a boatload of sweet potato plants the next time they came. And so next year they brought that, and sure enough, sweet potatoes became wildly popular in China. Everybody wanted to eat sweet potatoes. And so Chinese farmers began to clear off the mountains above the fertile rice valleys. They began to clear them of their forests, and they began to plant sweet potatoes, which grew well in the rocky soil of the mountains. Everything went well until the ecological disaster struck. You see, once they cleared off the forest to plant the sweet potatoes, there was no protection from the monsoon rains that came, the tropical rains that came. It wasn't long before the rains flooded off the mountains, flooding the rice valleys below, until now the rice crops are destroyed. Now there comes food shortages, famine, riots, anarchy. People are going crazy with hunger. And during that time, the emperors of China, they withdrew behind the walls of their forbidden city. Now anarchy reigns, chaos reigns, which gives rise to the age of the warlords. Various warlords trying to keep peace, which gave rise to more wars between warlords, barbarism, mass murder, millions of people killed, until China had descended into absolutely ungovernable chaos, at which point the Western powers came, the colonial powers, Portugal, Spain, England, Russia, later the United States, which led to the great upheavals of the 19th century, the Boxer Revolution, the destruction of the empire, and now even more chaos. The Japanese came in the 30s, and the Japanese Empire took over China, unleashing one of the most brutal genocides the world has ever known. After World War II, again, chaos and revolution as the nationalists and the communists fight against each other for control of China. And it wasn't until about 30 years ago that China finally recovered, finally joined the nations as one of the most powerful nations of the world. And it all started in the 1500s with a Chinese merchant who thought that sweet potatoes would be a good supplement to rice. I tell the story of the sweet potato that destroyed China to ask you a question. What do you think is that one thing that all of us can't live without today? That one thing that we are obsessed to have, that if someone were to come back 200 years from now, they would say that that one thing, like the sweet potato, destroyed our culture. Could I suggest the possibility that it might be the apple? I love my mobile device. I'm not sure I could live without it. It's a good thing. it keeps me close to my 38-year-old daughter. It allows me to text with her. It allows me to talk to her regularly, to exchange photos and videos, especially of my beloved grandchildren, Mira and May. I look forward to getting those pictures. And it draws us together more closely as a family. And so it's good to have this sweet potato of our age. In my hand, I hold all the accumulated knowledge of the world. But I wonder if someday people will come back and say, this is a thing that destroyed human relationships, the ability to speak, the ability to resolve conflicts face to face. So what I want to suggest to you today, as you remember this amazing story of the sweet potato that destroyed China, what I want to suggest is you don't get rid of your phone. It's a wonderful thing to have, or all your other mobile devices, all the other social media that you're part of, but rather that you occasionally put it aside. Engage in face-to-face conversation. When you're out at lunch with a friend, turn off your mobile device. Just look that person in the eye and have the conversation of your life. Grow together personally. I want to suggest, if you're a dad or a mom, that you just ban these devices at the table. Just take a time out, a Facebook time out, a cell phone time out, a Twitter, an Instagram time out, and just spend some time with each other. And you can read about the story of the sweet potato that destroyed China in my book, The Book of Amazing Stories. You can get it on Amazon.com or Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Walmart online, or better yet, on robertapeterson.org, where we'll send you a hand autographed copy of the book. And so just log on, order a book, and we'll be glad to send one to you. Also, you might want to look at my webpage and see about the tours, the legacy tours. I'd love to spend a week or two with you in one of the many spots we go to, Israel, Greece, Europe, and just explore the wonderful story that has been written. His story, history. Well, good to be with you today. Now, I'll be with you again on Thursday, and my subject will be the magnificent fraud. Now, you may see on your Facebook page, The Magnificent Freud, and I do think Freud had some magnificence about him, but this is going to be called The Magnificent Fraud. You don't want to miss it. I look forward to seeing you then.